Building a new PC is awesome, but sometimes it's an absolute nightmare. Hello there everyone, this is Dr. Modalot, and welcome to the office. I'd also like to welcome you to the first episode of what I like to call Modalot 101, a series that'll be all about tips, tricks, and good practices when it comes to working on any kind of tech project. Today I want to discuss PC building and troubleshooting. I was scrolling through YouTube a few days ago and I found a video titled I'm Sorry from a fellow YouTuber who goes by Caddicarus, or Caddy for short. I've watched some of his content in the past and he creates gaming related videos that lean primarily toward the PlayStation platform. I gave this video a watch out of curiosity and I learned that he hasn't posted any kind of videos in some time. By the sound of it, he was going for his first ever computer build after his laptop began to fail and, well, the computer build went really bad. Caddy experienced a lot of frustration and a lot of grief, and it cost him a lot of money, which, considering those circumstances, led him to this conclusion.
It was horrible. I hated it. I don't understand the appeal, I never want to do it again in my life.
The short version is his new PC had all sorts of issues that he had to try to troubleshoot before he could continue making his regular content. It was a really bad first experience for a PC builder. So having over 8 years of PC building experience myself, I sat down and watched through his video a handful of times. I paid close attention, I took down some notes, and after spending hours writing and analyzing, I think there had been some missteps and mistakes made that probably ended up being a lot of the source of many problems he went through. So here I am, making a sort of response video where I can give some PC building and troubleshooting advice while also making some clarifications on some of the things he said in his video. Before we begin, let me start by saying this. The experience Caddy had building his first computer was not normal. Out of the 20 or so computers I've built in my time, I'd say about 95% of my systems don't have any major faults like this. The remaining 5% is one computer I built recently that had some major issues, but this wasn't actually a computer for me. It was a computer for someone else who had already bought all the components. I had no prior knowledge of what these parts were that were purchased, I was just asked to put them together. That situation was also nowhere near as bad as what Caddy had to deal with in his build. I've cut down his video a bit because there were a lot of problems unrelated to the actual PC itself. I'm going to take a focus on points where he's part picking or actually working on the computer.
I realized I had no idea what I was doing when it came to building a new PC, so I called up my very good friend, Low Spec Gamer. This dude, by the way, is a master when it comes to PCs and PC building.
That was a really good choice to make. If you're planning to build a computer for the first time and you need some help, definitely get in touch with a friend or someone who already knows how to build a PC. YouTube guides are definitely helpful, but you can only learn so much from watching someone else work on their own computer. Having someone who can show you what to do for your system will make for a smoother and honestly more enjoyable PC building experience. At around 3 minutes into the video, he starts talking about what kind of parts he's bought for the PC. He mentions an RTX 3080, which ended up actually being an RTX 3090, a Ryzen 9 5950X, and an Asus Prime X570p motherboard. He also mentions a 2TB solid state drive and 32 gigs of Corsair RAM. I made a loose determination based on how much he paid that he bought a Samsung 970 EVO Plus, and this set of Corsair Vengeance RAM rated at 3600 MHz.
This is bloody expensive. This already totaled to £3,780. For all of you Americans out there, you can convert it yourself.
$5,204. That is definitely expensive, but your system doesn't have to be. I've built plenty of gaming computers in the past that have ranged in many different price brackets. My first ever gaming computer was about $1,000. I've built gaming computers for $400, $600. My current system I play games and record footage with was about $1,500. For all of you Brits out there, you can convert it yourself. Except I'm not that mean. That's just under 1,100 British pounds. When you go out of your way to purchase new, top-of-the-line, high-quality components, then yeah, you're gonna pay a lot. A new Bugatti Chiron will cost you way more than a new Ford Mustang, but you don't have to spend that kind of money on a new computer. The first thing you should do before you start picking parts for your computer is deciding what you're going to use your computer for. What game are you going to play the most? What software are you trying to run? Etc. Then you pick and choose your components around that. There's a slew of parts out there that you could buy on both the new and used marketplaces, and they can easily get you exactly what you're looking for in your build. Now, if you're having trouble deciding what kind of processor, RAM, or graphics card you should get for your build, I highly recommend going to YouTube and looking up benchmarks using the core components you're thinking about getting. That'll help you get a closer idea of the performance you should expect when you're playing games.
Considering this was the first time I'd ever built a PC entirely on my own, it did take a few hours, but the first day went surprisingly well, with me pointing the camera at different places of the motherboard.
Okay, so watching this video the third or the fourth time in, I noticed something that was concerning. He states he purchased an Asus Prime X570p, and he shows stock pictures of it numerous times throughout the video and refers to that model when he brings up later troubleshooting. But when he starts to show footage and pictures of the build partially completed, this is a different motherboard. This board is not an Asus Prime X570p. The board in this shot is an Asus Tough Gaming X570 Plus. You can tell because there's no white on this board at all, and you have this yellow pattern on the upper left near the CPU socket. Also, for some reason, the Tough Gaming logo was removed from the fan here on the motherboard. Maybe he bought it refurbished and it came to him like that? I'm not honestly sure. When building a computer and troubleshooting errors that the computer has, you need to know what components you actually have in your system, your motherboard especially. Otherwise, you could end up following completely wrong troubleshooting steps. You could install the wrong drivers entirely. Things could go really bad really fast. I honestly didn't think I would need to mention something like this, but this mistake is shown so many times in Caddy's video that I wasn't sure if it was an error in editing or if he legitimately confused his motherboard model with something else. Make sure you're buying the correct parts you've mapped out for your build, and always make sure you're looking up your exact product name or model number when you try to troubleshoot specific problems.
Screw everything into the right place, glue the cooling system to the processor with thermal paste, while making sure I was wearing anti-static bands, otherwise all of these immensely expensive components can break immediately if you so much as touch it.
This is half true. Grounding your system and yourself with anti-static mats and a wrist strap will give you some peace of mind, but the static you generate depends on so many different factors. The clothes you're wearing, if you're building your PC on carpeting versus tile or wood flooring, whether or not you live in dry climate, how much you're moving around while you're building your computer. Even then, it takes a lot of static buildup to damage your components. If you do want to build a PC or work on some electronic device without any kind of grounding tools, your best bets are to wear shoes and work on a hard floor surface like in your kitchen or your living room if it has wood flooring. If you can help it, try and avoid building a computer on a carpet and do whatever you can to mitigate the buildup of static electricity.
We managed to get to a point where everything was installed and plugged into a monitor, but it was all sitting on top of the box the motherboard came in outside of the PC case, just in case something was wrong with any of the parts before we committed to putting it inside the case.
This is actually a good practice. Build your PC outside of your case first so that if something isn't working, you can easily troubleshoot it without having to try and pull it out from the PC case. Also, it's going to make your installation a lot easier because you're not going to have to try to plug components in while your motherboard is inside of the case. You can take the entire bulk of your motherboard and the components on it and just install it into your case without much hassle. So in this video, this is where we start running into the problems and troubleshooting bits. I'm going to be covering a few of the different troubleshooting methods that he goes through and what could have maybe been done differently to save him some time and headache. If you need a snack or a drink, now's the time to pause the video and do that. Ready? Alright, let's continue.
We managed to get a signal up on the monitor, the BIOS menu popped up, and none of my USB keyboards or mice were working.
After just putting together your computer, you might find that you have trouble operating some devices such as keyboard or mice. Always have a spare keyboard or mouse at the ready in case you have a problem like this. It doesn't need to be anything fancy or high-end. In fact, the more basic the better. Just a simple wired USB 2.0 keyboard and mouse will work just fine, or even a PS2 input device if your motherboard supports that.
For all of those unaware, the BIOS is basically the central nervous system of the PC and dictates how it turns on, off, and what settings the entire PC uses at its absolute base level.
Okay, let's get really specific. That is a pretty basic way to explain the function of a BIOS, which is short for Basic Input-Output System. However, if you build a new computer, you're not even going to see this screen at all. What you will see is something more like this. This is called the Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, also known as UEFI. UEFI is the successor to BIOS, and it's considered to be more user-friendly while also offering more options for a user to be able to modify computer computer settings. How it functions and how it's stored on your system is way different than BIOS, and UEFI actually became the new standard well over 10 years ago. As a matter of fact, the board, or boards, that Caddy mentions for his build all use UEFI, not BIOS, even though everyone still calls it BIOS, probably because it's a more widely known term.
We both come to the agreement that I should order a smaller single stick of 8GB RAM.
Testing an alternate stick of RAM is a way to rule out if RAM is the problem or not, but what you should do first is actually test your build using only one stick of RAM from the set that you've already purchased. Your PC doesn't need dual channel RAM in order to boot, dual channel meaning when you have two DIMMs of similar RAM installed. Refer to your motherboard manual on where your single DIMM should plug into and try both sticks individually. If that doesn't work, then you can consider trying different RAM.
Stick of 8GB RAM that was from the official motherboard compatibility list.
Compatibility across devices is always important when building a PC. However, the screenshot that's shown here in the video is not an official compatibility list. This is a screenshot of the website PC Part Picker, which can be very helpful for mapping out a PC build in a can I plug this into my system sort of way. If you want to find an actual official manufacturer compatibility list for your RAM, what you want to look for is something called a QVL. QVL stands for Qualified Vendor List, and it's an entire spreadsheet listing what RAM models the manufacturer tested on the board and what ones work in what configuration. This list is huge, and it will take some time reading to find what you're looking for in it, but you can guarantee that RAM compatibility will not be an issue if you refer to this first.
The RAM arrived later that afternoon, and me and Low-Spec-Gamer jumped on another call to test it all out. Nope, wasn't having any of it. So then we move on to the next theory. Could it be the SSD?
What Caddy is trying to do here is get past the post process. Post stands for Power On Self-Test. When your computer first turns on, your system will quickly run through and verify all of the components, making sure everything is working properly. In fact, you might be familiar with this sound from computers you've turned on before. That's the sound of a post beep code. That single beep means that your computer completed the post process successfully. Beep codes are a very good method you can use to troubleshoot if your computer is having boot errors and what component in your system might be causing it. Many motherboards these days no longer have the speaker used to produce these beep codes, but they do still have the pins to attach a speaker to the board. The speaker that you would attach is very inexpensive, so I do recommend picking one up. Though an important feature I'd recommend looking for on a motherboard when you're buying one is a postcode debug display. This will give you a very specific alphanumerical code that you can also use to troubleshoot your boot errors. There is also a device out there that you can purchase if your motherboard doesn't have one of these either.
As it turned out, after another entire day of troubleshooting online, it turned out that the BIOS software itself was too outdated for the ultra-powerful processor I was using to run it.
The error that they're having here is caused by the fact that they haven't updated the UEFI to a new version that supports the Ryzen 5000 series of processors. The Ryzen 5000 series was released in November of 2020. The motherboard they're using for in this build was released over a year before that. This isn't the first time AMD has done this either. Previous generations of Ryzen processors have also required a UEFI update before they worked properly on older motherboard chipsets, specifically the Ryzen 3000 series. One of the absolute most important things you need to do when building a new computer is research. Treat buying PC parts the same way you would treat buying a car. I don't know about you, but when I go to look at a car, I spend hours looking up information about it on many different websites, looking for reviews, looking for recalls, all sorts of things. You should treat PC components the same way, especially your motherboard. Now, I don't think it's fair to expect Caddy, a first-time PC builder, to know about the Ryzen 5000 UEFI updates. However, he did have someone who knows computers well pick parts for him and help with the build. This is a problem that could have easily been avoided if more research was done before buying all of the components. Always read up on the computer parts you want to purchase so you can save yourself from compatibility headaches. So he talks a lot to get to the point where he is in the build next. He completed the UEFI update, he got his computer back together, and now it's not powering on for any reason. It's hard to identify what the source problem could be because, well, I don't have his computer right in front of me. It could have been a variety of different issues. He did remove the system from the case, put it back together again, but it still wasn't working. It was decided from here to buy a brand new MSI motherboard and move on from the old one. After he builds the system, again, he's able to install Windows and some of his programs, but then he starts having a long series of issues with his computer crashing and rebooting for no apparent reason.
It would crash when I was writing documents, crash when I opened Chrome, crash when a YouTube video loaded, crash when I opened Windows settings, crash when I opened Steam, crash when I closed Steam, crash when I started recording gameplay footage, crash when I stopped recording gameplay footage.
He eventually eventually takes the computer apart entirely, tests devices individually, buys new RAM, buys a new power supply, all sorts of different troubleshooting methods. There was one thing he didn't try though that I probably would have recommended. He had to buy a second generation Ryzen 5 2600 processor for the last motherboard in order to update the Uefi on it. Now, maybe he already returned that processor, but I would have recommended actually testing the system out using that Ryzen 5 2600 and seeing if it was the processor itself that was the issue. As far as I could tell, that had not been done. Other commenters on the video also point out that the issues that he's been having could be related to the CPU. Nothing really major happens with the rest of his video. He tried a variety of different troubleshooting methods to get his computer working. The last thing he tried before giving up was deleting Windows from the system entirely, wiping the drives clean, and reinstalling Windows. It didn't work. In fact, he accidentally deleted over 18 hours of footage that was already saved on the computer. This isn't exactly a PC building tip, more of a YouTube content creator / regular PC use tip. Invest into an external drive. I purchased a 4TB hard drive and connected it to my computer with a SaberNet hard drive dock. Whenever I record footage, I default my software to always save my video to this hard drive rather than the storage on board the computer. The main reason is that videos take up a ton of hard drive space, so I like to save the room on my computer for other documents. The other reason is so that the data doesn't get lost if I have a critical system error. Yeah, this computer build of his sounds awful. I feel bad that this was his first experience building a PC, but I also feel like this build may have gone off without a hitch the first time if enough research had been done to begin with. If he and his building partner had known about the Uefi update for his Ryzen processor at the very start, I imagine the computer maybe would have just worked. Moving parts in and out of the case repeatedly is wear and tear on the components. If you're not building in the right environment, mishandling your parts, or not putting them away properly when you're done, you could end up doing damage to your parts while you're just trying to fix it. Or maybe it was the 5950X itself. Maybe he just needed to test the other Ryzen processor he bought. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this build was just destined to be the 5% of builds that just don't go right. He says at the end of the video that he did possibly fix it, and I wish he did tell us what was done to get it to work for him again. But he also showed this picture at the very beginning of the video. This is his new computer. I confirmed it based on the case he said he bought, and if this is what it's starting to look like already, I have no idea how long his new system is going to actually last for. Elevate that PC off the carpet, please. Put it on a table, a desk, a printer stand, just anything that gets it off the ground so it doesn't collect more dust. In the end, important tips for building or troubleshooting a computer. Tip 1. Do your research. Go online and read up on the parts you're looking at buying. Look for reviews, issues, anything you can that will give you more insight on your components so that you know what to expect going in. Tip 2. Check compatibility. Make sure everything that you purchase will work together. Put your system together in PC Part Picker, look up benchmarks, find QVL sheets on your parts, and make sure the components you purchase are up to date with one another. Tip 3. Have the right tools. A beep code speaker may be an afterthought to some, but having all the right equipment ready to go will save you major hassle in the long run. If something were to go wrong, then you'll at least have the equipment to try and determine the root cause rather than having to make guesses. You know, I didn't think there was gonna need to be a fourth tip, but tip number 4, know your components. I feel this goes without saying, but whenever you troubleshoot your components or equipment, make sure you're looking up the right information for the right product. Otherwise, you could, you know, end up going nowhere with your troubleshooting or making the situation even worse. Building a PC for your first time will more than likely be intimidating, but rarely ever do I hear horror stories like Caddy's build. If you want to build a PC but worry about these kinds of problems, I highly recommend you do what I did for my first PC build. Buy a pre-built computer. I'm dead serious. Buy a pre-built computer that meets your needs, but also buy an additional component to install. Something simple like a power supply, RAM, or a graphics card. This way you'll get your pre-built PC in the mail knowing that it will work just right out of the box. You won't have to worry about troubleshooting an operating system or anything like that. Then once you've confirmed your computer works, open it up, install the new component you bought, and that's it. It's not much. It's not like building an actual PC in its entirety, but it will allow you to get a view inside your system and get you comfortable with working on the components inside it. If the time comes and you're feeling bold, buy a new PC case entirely and do a case swap. Just move the parts from the pre-built into a nice new chassis. At that point, you'll have pretty much completed your first actual PC build. I have one more thing that I want to say. Caddicarus, Caddy, if you happen to be watching this video, I implore you, try again. Try another PC build. This first computer may have left a bad taste in your mouth, I understand, but I'd like to see you buy some different parts and try something new, try something different. The reason why the PC building hobby is so huge and so appealing is because you can make whatever you want. I've built some wild computers in my time, and I take pride in the systems that I end up making. In fact, if you want to, let me help you with your next computer build. I bet we could do something really sweet, like a PlayStation emulation machine, and it wouldn't cost nearly as much as what you paid for this build. But that does it for today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Modalot 101. If you guys have any other tips or tricks about PC building and troubleshooting, list them down in the comments section, and until next time, this has been Dr. Modalot. Thank you for stopping by the office.
Thank you.